Welcome back to Link by Golf. I'm your host Ross McGuire, and in this episode I'm delighted to be joined by Callum Macaulay, a fantastic Scottish golfer. Callum has achieved a lot in his life and has some great stories to tell and a lot of advice for those coming through in the game. So without any further delay, let's go over to the show. On this week's episode of Link by Golf, I'm delighted to be joined by Callum Macaulay. Callum, how are you doing?
Good, thanks, Ross. How are you?
Yeah, very good, mate. Very good. And the way I start the pod is very simple. I've done the same thing in every single one. So we start with where were you born and brought up, and how did you get into golf?
Well, I was born in Falkirk and was brought up in the small village of Kincardine, not a few miles away. Grew up in Kincardine through my sort of primary school, high school life, into my university life. I was still staying at home with my mum and dad, and I left Kincardine in 2009. And the kind of last sort of 14, 15 years I've been in Paisley. So um, I wouldn't call myself a chuchter anymore, but I do get called one now and again.
Brilliant. And then, so you're in Kincardine, and how did the golf come about for you in your younger years?
Yeah, well, I always had a kind of golf orientated family. My mum actually represented Scotland when she was younger. She played for Scotland at hockey and golf. So I think her and my dad would argue where my talent came from. My dad would argue it was probably him helping me. My dad was always a decent golfer. I think he got down to sort of really low single figures at one point. Um, I had a really close uncle who's sadly not here anymore. He was a plus golfer. Um, my dad's cousin he was in the police for 30, 40 years. He was a Scottish police champion for a long time. So golf was always in my family. And yeah, when I was 3, 4 years, I think I was about 3 years old. I remember, well, I don't remember much of being 3, 4 years old, but that was sort of when my dad told me that I got started. I got a club in my hand, and back then you weren't allowed to be a member of it, or you certainly weren't allowed to be a member of Tully Allen. Until you were 9 years old. So my dad would just take me out when he wasn't working, and I don't really have a lot of vivid memories from kind of way back, kind of when that age. But I certainly remember getting my first membership and getting my little bag tag and my sticker and being able to go out and play off the blue tees and things like that. So yeah, when I was I think I always stayed in Kincardine, as I said, but I kind of stayed down in the kind of main village. But when I was about 9 or 10 years old, we moved up. My mum and dad bought a house literally right across the road from the car park at Tullyallen Golf Club. So
Well, that
you
would
know, it
help.
was it was yeah, it was handy. It was literally a 50-yard walk to the first tee. So that became my life really. I did play a little bit of football, but I had absolutely no business trying to play football the standard I was. And made a decision when I was sort of 12, 13 that golf was going to be what I wanted to do going forward.
Brilliant. So at 12 or 13, in terms of what you're playing in, just local club events and starting to get a handicap and that type of thing.
Yeah, that was it. There certainly wasn't the kind of volume of competitions for young kid golfers then than there is nowadays. So it was just a case of playing in the playing in the junior medals really to start with. And then one thing I always remember about the members at Tullyallen, and it's a credit to them. I got to play with a lot of the older guys, a lot of my dad's friends, and a lot of kind of older members. I say older, they're probably maybe 25, 30 years old at the time, but for a 12, 13-year old, that you obviously looked up to them and they were your peers. And that's something that doesn't really happen a lot nowadays. Like, there's no, for the most part, there's no real encouragement. It's a case of we want to play with our own mates and that's it. Whereas I learned a lot about the game playing with these guys, and they were quite happy to have us playing in their winter sweeps. And okay, they might not be the best golfers, but you do learn a lot from them, whether it's the rules or whether it's your etiquette. And it was great to be able to play with these guys. So sort of 12, 13, 14, I always remember kind of playing with them and just playing in junior medals. And my handicap gradually was coming down, but I wasn't really making any waves, to be perfectly honest. I had a very, I still do actually. I had a very unorthodox golf swing, and my dad decided to take me up to see a coach, Elliot Rowan, up in St Andrews.
Okay.
I think I'd been maybe about 14 or 15 at the time, and he changed a lot about how I gripped the club, how I swung the club, and it took a little bit of time. There's a bit of transition there, trying to get things back to normal. So my handicap never plummeted like I would hope it would have. But it
Right.
was, I seen it as a bit of a challenge, just trying to gradually get better and better, and I enjoyed it. I never ever lost my love for it. It was as frustrating as it was. My mum and dad kind of kept encouraging me and saying, "Listen, you never know what's going to happen in this game in your life. You just need to keep plodding away," and that's what I did.
That's a really great message for a teenager as well. That I think I can resonate a lot with what you're saying about those situations, Callum, where you learn from a lot of these older guys. And sometimes, depending who it is, they might have the view you need to be X handicap by a certain age, and it's not really true, right? I mean, yeah, you've got outliers like McIlroy or Tiger, but the vast majority of golfers are picking up later in their teens and then really progressing then.
Yeah, I don't think I don't think you're never ever going to know your full potential with golf as well, and that's the great
No,
thing about it. When have you peaked? You never know with golf. You just keep going, and you could have two, three, four bad weeks in a row, and then you go out one night for a game after work, and you have you play well, and it gives you that sort of that kind of injection of confidence and a bit of excitement, and you're absolutely buzzing for the weekend. So, yeah, I suppose you could see it as that way. It's just it's a game you'll never be able to perfect. And as Bob
yeah,
Rutella says, golf's not a game of perfect, and he's absolutely spot on.
definitely not in the case of me. So, in your teenage years, then, Callum, as you got older and you said you started to progress, what kind of tournaments are you playing in, and what access were you getting to events beyond Tully Allen?
Well, I started playing county golf. I was obviously part of club manager, playing club manager junior stuff. I was part of the kind of junior setup, the county squad, and got a little bit more coaching and just experience being around the guys, different guys, not necessarily your local club members and your mates. So I gradually started to get my handicap down. I remember kind of doing well in the. I actually remember doing well in the handicap boys championship at Tully Allen. So these little things give you a bit of confidence, and then as I started working a little bit more with Elliot, and my dad was helping me as well, I really did start to get serious about it. And when I was probably 16, kind of going into fourth year at school, I said to my mum and dad, I was like, listen, I want to go to America. I want to
Really?
go and
Wow.
I
So you
want,
knew
yeah, I
that
mean,
early at 16?
I think I did. I think just because I think because I'd been working so hard trying to get better, and I knew America would give me the best opportunity to take that step even further. When you look at the facilities and you look at the weather and stuff here in the UK, there's nothing really that excites you. There's nothing that's really going to help drive you forward. Certainly between October and April time, there's nothing. And
Very tough,
so
isn't
my
it? It's
my
very
kind of
hard.
yeah my main sort of ambition turned to the US, and I said to my mum and dad, and to be fair to them, they had put a lot of time and effort into me trying to become the best player I could be, and I thought it was just going to be a simple yes. They're definitely going to back me here. But they sat down with me and they said, listen, we're not paying for you to go on a golfing holiday in the US. Like we want you to get your degree. We want you to go to university. If you're going to do something, we want you to, because I think as much as they wanted me to do well, I doubt that they thought I was going to ever do anything at all with the game, and they were more focused on me having an academic background. So that's where the whole sort of journey of going out to the US started, and the mindset changed, and I think subconsciously you just start working a little bit harder on the golf course practice area, but also in the classroom as well. You know what's about to
Yeah.
happen, and so that sort of started a journey for me towards looking at going out to the US, and that's obviously what happened in the end.
Yeah, and you went out to college. So do you want to talk about that experience and how basically it came around? How did you identify the college? What was the process for you?
Yeah, well, not for it to sound like a plug here, but I work for a company obviously called First Point USA, and First Point were the company that actually sent me to the States. So
Wow, excellent.
Andrew Keen's our CEO and founder. He's from Dunoon originally. He
Uh-huh.
had graduated. He had been on a soccer scholarship to the University of Cincinnati.
Right.
He wasn't long home, and he started up First Point as a charity originally. Um, and so at the time, there was very limited internet access back then. In
Yeah.
2001. Um, my mum came across First Point, and Andrew actually came to my house, and he sat in my living room and he told me all about this experience that he had just had for the previous 4 years, and the facilities and the infrastructure they have out there, and I thought, yeah, this is definitely what I want to do. So I was one of Andrew's very first clients. He helped me kind of through the process by sort of putting everything together, trying to establish what the right level of university would be for me. I played off four at the time. Um, so I wasn't ever going to go to a Stanford or a UCLA, and I didn't really have the grades to go to that type of school either. So
Uh-huh.
that's the thing with the States, is you need that balance of your grades and your golfing ability. One can be better than the other, but you have to have a specific level of both. So I was a decent student in school, and ended up getting three or four offers, but I decided to choose the University of Mississippi. So I sort of got myself prepared for that. I wasn't really I wasn't really at the level at the time to be considered for any national squads or anything like that. So,
Okay.
I felt like I always wanted to represent my country, don't get me wrong, but I felt like if I went to the US and proved myself out there, then maybe, that might happen eventually. So yeah, so I went out. I started kind of going through the process in 2001. I didn't actually go to the US until 2002.
Wow.
Started my journey that year, and then
And what age were
and
you,
then
what age were you at that time, Callum, when you were doing
so
that?
I was just about to turn 19, or I was 19.
Right.
I went out in August and I was 19 in the December. So I took a gap year out of school. I wasn't quite ready to make that huge jump.
Uh-huh.
More psychologically than anything. It gave me an extra year to kind of work on my golf and try and get better. I got a job working in the Clydesdale Bank at one point, just to try and save up some money as well. So um, yeah, I went out, and obviously the first few weeks was really, really difficult. I'd gone from a really small village in Fife to the deep south, and living in a sort of an hour south of Memphis. So I wasn't really sure what to expect.
Uh-huh.
Um, Gradually sort of broke in not to the team. I actually redshirted my freshman year, which means that you don't actually play. You still train and you practice and you work out with the team and all that kind of stuff, but you don't get to compete in any of the official events. So that was a bitter swallow, a bitter pill to swallow. Sorry, just trying to figure out, well, why have I made this huge leap of faith over here and I'm not getting to play? But it
Uh-huh.
actually benefited me because it gave me an extra year to play afterwards. So yeah, it wasn't until I kind of been there the first year and a half, 2 years, that I really started to see a difference. And the great thing about it was, you'd spend the whole fall semester there. You'd come home at Christmas time, you go back out
Mm-hmm.
in January, you're playing in good weather, shorts and t-shirt for 4 or 5 months, and then I would come home the second week in May. And the first tournament would always, sorry, the first tournament would be the one right after the Lytham Trophy. I can't remember what one it was. Maybe the West of Scotland Amateur or something at the time. So I
Uh-huh.
would play in that. I'd play in that every year, but I would gradually see my results starting to get better in every tournament. You know,
Brilliant.
Back then your handicap didn't change. It wasn't like the system I've got now. Whatever handicap you had in August when you went out there was the same one you had when you come back. So
Oh, of course, because you were
um,
on the Scottish system effectively, or the,
the real
double
the real
WHS.
system, as I call it.
Yeah, that's definitely one way to look at it. So then you're talking about college there and you're progressing every year. So how did the results basically continue to develop at college? And then when you're coming back for the summers, you mentioned you're seeing progress. What was giving you that, identification of the changes you were seeing?
Well, getting to practice sort of 4 or 5 hours every day,
Uh-huh.
6 days a week, that it's going to help you. You're getting guided by the coaches. You're playing against much better players. one thing I learned a lot to begin with, I started thinking like them, so that Americans and these well, Americans in general are very positive, and when I first went out there, I was quite shy and quite reserved, and I didn't really think the way they did, and I've quickly realised I'm going to have to start thinking like these guys, otherwise I'm not going to be able to compete, particularly with golf, with it being such a mental sport. So as I started to find my feet, both physically, mentally, and started practicing all the time, I did start to see myself progressing. I started breaking into the team. I was playing in more tournaments. And then, as I said earlier, like when I came home, I was playing in the same events every summer, but I could see myself starting to get better and get better. So I think the first breakthrough would be about it might have been 2005. I can't remember. It was the year that Kev won the Scottish Amateur and the stroke play and the match play. The one that he won at
Right.
Nairn, and
Uh-huh.
I actually beat Richie Ramsey in I think the last 16. And I always remember one of the selectors came over to me and he said, "If you get selected for the home internationals, would you come back from college?" And I said, "Absolutely, no question, I'll be
Of course
there."
you would.
Because I'd never really been involved with anything with SGU or anything like that before. That was
My goodness.
that was the first even chat I'd had with a selector. So, and it was actually the week before Richie went out and won the US Amateur. So he was at the top of his game, and I says, "Listen, absolutely, I'll be here." Anyway, the day before that I went back to uni, I got a phone call to say that I wasn't first reserve, I was second reserve, which was even bigger kick in the teeth. So that really, really made me determined. I was like, I'm going to do everything I can when I go back here to make sure that I'm in this team. I want to be in this team going forward. So, luckily, I'd when I came home the following summer, I had a really good season, and I think I might be a summer behind. I can't remember, but there was one summer that I
Yeah.
came home and I won quite a few Order of Merit events, and then I subsequently won the Order of Merit, and obviously I managed to get into the team, and then my kind of international career really kicked off from then. I didn't really look back until I turned pro, which was nice.
Brilliant. And so there's another part I want to ask you about in terms of championships, but in terms of getting into that Scottish team, how did you feel? What was the kind of feeling you were having? You've worked so hard to get there over such a long time.
Yeah, really. Obviously, it was really, really proud. I was really happy for myself, but I was equally as happy for my dad and for my family because I know how much they'd put into it. And it was a huge honour for me to represent my country. And you grow up sort of seeing all these players, your Barry Humes, your Mark Warrens, these guys, and you want to be in that team, you want to be in that squad. Funnily enough, I always remember the shoes that the international team were given at that time. They had a little red line rampant on the back
Yeah.
heel, and you always wanted a pair of those shoes. And
FootJoy
so it
Classics
was
as well.
yeah, yeah. So there was some nice ones, and it was just to have, just to say that you represent your country. That was a massive thing, and we got to go some really, really nice places. It was at the time where Aberdeen had just kind of and invested heavily in SGU, and they were funding to go a lot of different places, Australia, Morocco, South Africa, these kind of places. So yeah, to be part of that was great, but just to be able to play for Scotland and home internationals and these kind of things is something that thankfully will never get taken away from me, and it's always something I can say that I've done.
Yeah, and speaking of things that we definitely can't take away from you, in 2008, you won the Scottish Amateur Championship, I believe at Carnoustie. Is that correct? You
Yep.
want to talk us through that week and how it went?
Yeah, that was a great week for a lot of different reasons. Everything just really fell into place. I was in a really good spot. I was ranked or I was the number one seed going into the tournament, and there was I suppose there's a little bit of a bullseye on your back when you're number one seed. But I had been playing well. I was really confident, and everything seemed to be going pretty well. And I remember my mum and dad and I stayed in a caravan just outside Carnoustie. Every single night I watched the movie Remember the Titans. Every single night I watched it from start to finish. So just one of my favorite films with Denzel Washington, and um, I remember I played pretty steady. There was two or three kind of comfortable victories in there. And then I played a lad called Anthony Buse, who put me under a hell of a lot of pressure, kind of going into the last couple of holes. I remember he holed about a 50 or a 60 footer across the 17th green to go all square, and then hit a great second shot, into the last, and I hit it through the green. So I had to get it up and down for a half, and then we went to extra holes. I think I won on maybe the third or the fourth playoff hole.
Wow.
And then in the final, got to play one of my good pals, and Stevie McEwen, and Stevie and I had played a lot of golf together the kind of previous 3-4 years, and um, got an incredible break the first round. I think Stevie was three up after 5 he was in the morning, and I snap hooked a tee shot on 6, and am I right in thinking 6 is Hogan's Alley, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Aye.
So up
Yep.
the left hand side, the OB, that it's not like a big continuous fence. They've literally just got fence posts that are about a golf ball width wide. And my ball was hurtling out of bounds and hit one of the posts and came back in. I managed to get a half, and then we had a thunder and lightning break. So we all stayed out in the shelter at the 7th tee for about 45 minutes, and then after that, everything just clicked. I played really well the second round, or the rest of the first round, and then played well in the second round. I think I ended up winning 4-3. But I remember putting really well that week, and if you putt well in match play, you're going to have a really good chance. I felt comfortable on the greens all week, and a lot of my family were up watching the final, and Paul Laurie obviously presented me with the trophy after
Well, what
after
an
the
experience. That's
after
awesome.
the
Honesty,
so
Paul.
back then that was great. Yeah, he came down, and he'd watched some of the last round, which was good, and then we all went back to Tully Allen and had a bit of a party, so it was good.
No wonder. Brilliant. Well, that's an awesome story. And the great thing is, Callum opens up further doors for you with Scotland. And I hope I've got the timing right, but that year in particular, you had another fantastic experience playing for Scotland. Do you want to talk a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, so that obviously led into a few really good things. We with the Eisenhower Trophy, it was because it was a 3-man team. It was a harder team to get into than it had previously been. It used to be GB and I, which it would have been still difficult for Scottish players to get into that. But nonetheless, 3-man team, myself, Gavin, and Wallace. We were given the honour of going out to play at Royal Adelaide, and I just remember, from start to finish, the week was just a really great fun time to be there. That we'd spent a lot of time practicing. We'd actually been out to Australia the year before, with a couple of practice rounds at Royal Adelaide in the Grange just to see the course. There was probably 6 or 8 of us went out that time, but it was just in case 3 of the selected players were within that squad. They'd seen the course. But we'd got out there a few days early. We went to Sydney. We spent some time playing with sponsors. And then we went down to Royal Adelaide, and we were there 3 or 4 days before. So I think that was the edge right away. And credit to Ian Ray and George Crawford, who was the captain, and Spencer Henderson. Like they had that sort of that idea. Let's get down there before anyone else. Let's get acclimatized. Let's have a couple of practice rounds, and let's go for a couple of nice meals and things like that. And we just felt settled before the practice rounds even started.
And it doesn't sound like you're overdoing the golf. You're having an experience of Australia as well as you're getting your practice in early and getting used to the time zones.
Yeah, we did what we needed to do. We had our practice rounds, we hit balls, we practiced our putting, and then we'd go home and chill out. I remember walking along the beach at Adelaide every day, just kind of recovering, walking on the sand, and just stuff like that. Like the week stands out really clearly. But the big thing that really helped us was just how strong the winds were and how hard the golf course. The Grange, not so much. The Grange was a little bit more lush, but Royal Adelaide was brick hard, and we were used to that. We'd been playing golf like that all summer, and on links turf at home, and I think we had a 3 or a 4 shot lead over America going into the last round. So the American team was Ricky Fowler, Billy Horschel, and Jamie Lovemark. And when we got sort of driving in, there's a long windy driveway off the main road into Royal Adelaide, and it was absolutely howling winds, and we were rubbing our hands. We thought this is going to be great. And I think I started with, I think I birdied 4 of the first 5 holes. And
What?
the lead just went from 4 to 8 or 9 within
Wow.
the space of an hour. And it was
That's
just a case
awesome.
of trying to nurse it home. So, but it was a brilliant week. And something to obviously look back on. And we actually had a sort of reunion, if you like, a couple of years ago back at Muirfield. We all met, the guys that had been out there, and Wallace and Ian and Gavin and myself. We went back to Muirfield and just kind of reminisced. So it was nice.
That's very nice. And what a victory against, I mean, you mentioned Ricky Fowler and Billy Horschel, and I'm sure the field had been completely stacked at that time. And what a victory for Scotland. Well done. Awesome.
Yeah, no, it was good. A strong field, but yeah, it was nice to win. It was definitely nice to win.
And that year, again, I hope I've got the timing right, you move into professional golf. So what was the kind of process there? And I guess clearly winning the Scottish Amateur and then being world champions must have been a big factor in you deciding to turn pro as well.
Yeah, so there was two people that I met. I'd already met Colin Dalgleish prior to the prior to the Eisenhower. But Ian Ray had introduced me to another guy, Brendan Taylor, who I didn't really know. It's Dennis Taylor's son. I'll explain the relevance behind that in a minute. But at the closing ceremony, Colin had said to me, "Listen, things are looking really positive for the Walker Cup next year in Merion." He said, "So go back to tour school and go for yourself, and just worst case, things are looking okay for next year." So why that's relevant? Before we went to Adelaide, I had already got through first stage of tour school, and I was going back. So that the SGU were really kind to say, "Listen, if you want to go and get experience at tour school as an amateur, we're happy to sort of cover the entry fee for you." So I thought, why not? So I went to the Oxfordshire, managed to get through first stage, and then obviously went out to Australia. So when we were in Australia, we went out for dinner one night with Brendan. So Brendan works for WMG, Wasserman Media Group. It was obviously a golf agent, and it wasn't really something, it was definitely not something that was on my radar at the time, but I had a really good rapport with him. I remember him watching me in the last round. We said our goodbyes, and that was really it. So came home, went out to Arcos Gardens. Again, I wasn't really putting too much pressure on myself, but I knew I was playing well, and I thought if I can play well second stage, you never know. You never know what's going to happen. So shot 74, first 2 rounds. And I remember Ian Ray just came into the clubhouse and he said, "Come on, we'll go for a walk." I said, "I want to have a wee chat." And we just chatted about the first 2 rounds and, what did you do wrong? And I said, honestly, I didn't feel like I did much wrong. I didn't putt very well. And this was something that Ian never got nearly enough credit for, just how good a kind of, you hear this word man manager in football. Like, he was a great man manager in golf. He was brilliant with players. And
Uh-huh.
me and Ian had a really, really good relationship. And we went for a walk around the clubhouse for 20 minutes and just chatted about a couple of different things. And the third and fourth round, I think I shot 67, 67 or 68, 68. It was the same score anyway, but I got in on the number to get to final stage at
Wow.
Catalonia the following week. And went to Catalonia and met Brendan again. After the first 2 or 3 rounds, I was up there. I was up towards the top 30, which you needed to be at that time. Again, I wasn't really thinking about anything. And then the night before the last round, he said, "Do you want to, we'll maybe have a chat at some point?" And as soon as he mentioned that in professional golf, I was like, "Oh wow, this is getting overwhelming
Getting
here. Like, I'm
serious.
still an amateur." And it wasn't until I couldn't sleep that night. I'd been fine all week, but that's when the realization hit me, thinking, I could be on the European tour tomorrow. So I just, when I woke up, I was like, I just need to get to the practice area. I just need to get a club in my hand, and I'll be fine. Just hit balls again. Sure enough. So I played steady. I think I finished 18th or 19th or something in the final stage, and
Wow.
the next week I was at Leopard Creek playing in my first European Tour event. So everything happened so quickly.
That's crazy.
Um,
And you're up against,
yeah,
again, in the qualifying, I mean, the tour school is talked about as being so tough. The pressure, guys have maybe been through it a few times. There's people like yourself who are first time, folk who've never made it, people have had their cards for some cases 15, 20 years. So for you to go there and do that first time is really incredible.
Yeah, I think it was probably, I wouldn't say it was physically easier for me, but mentally it probably was because I didn't feel like I had anything to lose. But because I've been on both sides of that. Like I've been on the side of it where I can go and just play and it doesn't matter if I finish last or if I finish first. But I've also been on the side of it where I've lost my card and I've went back and I'm now playing to try and stay on the European tour. And half of that field are beat before they even get there. Because it's just at the end of the day, it is your livelihood. And I didn't really have that to worry about the first time round. So
Uh-huh.
I could play with a sense of freedom. I knew there was a good chance I'd be playing in the Walker Cup the next year if it didn't work out. So I was like, well, so what? And it wasn't until, like I said, the night before the last round where it actually became a reality. I was like, wow, like if I play well tomorrow, I could be going to South Africa next week to start my professional career. And thankfully that was how it turned out. And um, it was a short-lived career, to be fair. And listen, I'll be the first to tell you, I massively overachieved in the game of golf. If someone looked at my swing and someone looked at the way that I prepared and all that kind of stuff, you'd be like, how has he managed to do it? But I was pretty strong mentally when I was playing well. My mind was in a really clear place, and I felt like I could do things that maybe my swing wouldn't suggest that I could. And but yeah,
And I
I
think
can I
that
can tell my kids.
you proved the point there, Callum, that it's not about what it looks like, right? It's about what you're doing. The
Yeah,
ball's not talking back to you, so
no,
as long as it goes in the hole, it doesn't matter.
that's right. Yeah, absolutely.
And then you had a number of years on tour. Do you want to talk about some of those experiences? Any memories that stick out? I mean, Leopard Creek, what a place to start. That's an amazing place to go.
Yeah, that really was surreal because and I've said this before in different things, like when I first got to Leopard Creek that week. So my dad came with me. My dad caddied for me the first year I was out there, and
Oh, what a
just kind
nice
of continued
experience. That's awesome.
continued what we were doing at amateur golf. Like, he caddied for me all my time through amateur golf as well. And the first week I was out at Leopard Creek, I was on the range, and you grab your basket of balls and you walk past Ernie Els, you walk past Retief Goosen, you walk past, whoever it is, the who's who of golf, and you're like, am I actually, is this actually real? Am I going to wake up soon, sort of thing, So, but that took a little bit of getting used to, certainly. Um, there's no doubt, like the kind of main highlight of my first year, um, was in Madeira, finishing second in Madeira. That really catapulted me, and that really gave me that belief, if nothing else, that I could play at that level. Um, and that was the
And
first sort of significant finish that I'd had. And then, yeah,
when you
I had two
say
or three.
in terms of
Sorry.
Madeira, what was it, that week? How did that go for you? Was it, right from the start you're in the mix, or was it just building up towards the end?
No, it was literally until the back nine. So it was on Porto Santo, which is an island just off Madeira. It's about 20 minutes flight. Um,
Uh-huh.
and it was really windy, and I hadn't played any tournaments since January, so this was in maybe March or April time, because I hadn't got into any of the big events over in Asia and Malaysia and things like that. So that was my first tournament I'd played in a few weeks. So I was a wee bit rusty. I made the cut on the mark. And then I said to myself, if I can go out in the third round and just shoot level par, I'll probably move up quite a bit because it was really windy. I think I shot 4 under maybe and moved up maybe 30 or 40 places. And then the last round, I went out and won over par, which I was quite happy with, more than happy with, because it was really windy. Um, and then birdied 10, birdied 11, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. And I was like, so I'd just plummeted, or not, I don't know what the opposite of plummeted, shot up the leaderboard, if you like.
So how many
And I
birdies,
wasn't really
run
think
that by me again, how many birdies was at the back nine when it's blown a
so.
hoolie?
I birdied 8 of the last 9, and it was crazy. Like every putt was going in, every shot was going where I was trying to hit it. I was playing with Jarmo Sandelin as well, which was quite funny. He was keeping me going. He's a Swedish legend.
Yeah, totally.
And yeah, it was just one of these crazy days. And when I got in off the course, it kind of hit me like, right, well, that's great. I'm going to get a good check this week. And Tano Goya, who plays on the Corn Ferry Tour just now, he he was like 3 or 4 shots ahead. And then when the press were interviewing me after my round, they said, "Oh, Goya just doubled 16," and I'm like, all right, I might have a shot here. And he ended up holding a really good putt in the last, to be fair, to beat me by a shot. But yeah, that was the first taste of what I'd kind of been experiencing when I was playing amateur the year before. Just being in that sort of frame of mind where I felt like I could do anything, sort of thing. And but it was the biggest detriment to my career at the same time, which is
Really?
interesting because
Yeah.
when I came home. I'd been on a 3 week spell. I finished second in Madeira, and then I finished top 15 in Spain, and I think I'd done all right in Portugal as well. So I came home, and back then it might be different now, but you basically get paid 2 weeks after the tournament finished. So by the time I got home, I had all this money in my account, and I'm like, right, what am I going to do? So I kind of settled for a couple of months, still staying at home, and then I made the decision I was going to get my own place. Um, and I moved over to Paisley, closer to my girlfriend at the time. It was obviously right next to the Glasgow airport. That was my justification of moving to Paisley, because it was next to Glasgow airport. But yeah, got my own house, got a new car, was living 30, 40 minutes away from Glasgow Gales, where I joined, and
Right.
everything changed. I stopped practicing as hard. I didn't have the golf course on my doorstep outside. I didn't have the same motivation. I thought I'd made it. I was like, I've made it. I'm on the European tour, and I've finished second, and I've got this money, and it'll always be the biggest regret in my life, changing my mentality. I never ever had anything growing up. Not nothing, but I certainly never had 5, 6 figures in my bank account like I like all of a sudden did. Let's just get the cigars out and get the slippers on, and just see what happens, and that's the biggest regret I'll ever have in golf, really, because I never ever got back to that point where I was playing the way that I did, and it's something I would share with anyone. And that's why I said it earlier on. You can never perfect this game, and that's the reality of it. So yeah, harsh lesson. I'm sure everybody's get lessons that they'll learn from, but that was the sort of high point, and what ultimately became the low point of my career, all in the one year.
Yeah. And I mean,
Um, but
what a situation in terms of what you've achieved in that short period. I mean, shooting it under that back nine must have just felt ridiculous, and it's brilliant. I'll be honest, Callum, that you're opening up and saying it didn't really help you in the end, because not
yeah,
many people are willing to admit those things.
yeah. I mean, when I look back, like I think it's one of these things where you obviously look at it as a positive. It was an unbelievable experience for me getting to tour. It was arguably a pipe dream that I had, and it was all everybody has these dreams when they grow up of wanting to do this and wanting to do that. I got to do it, but what my biggest regret now is, I played loads of golf with Danny Willett. I played loads of golf with Shane Lowry, with Tommy Fleetwood, these guys, and when you see them on the telly every week, there's always that, oh, that could have been me, sort of thing, But
Uh-huh.
you never know. And listen, there's no point in looking back. And I,
No,
I, I
no,
managed
not at
to
all.
I managed to fight my way back onto European Tour in 2014. But it was just a couple of good weeks I had at tour school. I wasn't my game wasn't ready. It wasn't good enough to go and play against these guys. And I proved that. I think I only made maybe 3 or 4 cuts across the course of the year. Fell back onto the Challenge Tour again. Um, and then the last year or so, I was just kidding myself on. I just had lost the love for it. And I just didn't want to be on the golf course anymore. And that's when I kind of just decided that I was gonna stop, and I was gonna find something else to do. And that's kind of just similar timing. I did taxi driving for about a year or so in Renfrewshire, and then I got the call from Andrew to say, "Do you want to come back to First Point?" And I thought, yeah, it's time to
Yeah, and
do that.
that slips us perfectly into the next phase of your career, which is with First Point. So do you want to just talk us through First Point and your role there and all the things that you're working on with the company?
Yeah, so I'm a senior consultant with First Point. So what that means is I get to kind of meet families right at the offset and tell them all about what the United States can provide for them and their families and their kids. And with social media being so extensive nowadays, people see these videos and these highlights of college sport in the US, and they see the 100,000 people at American football games and 40,000 people at American basketball games, and they think, wow, that looks amazing. But those videos don't show you being a full-time student. They don't show you being 6,000 miles away from your family. They don't show you getting injured. They don't show you getting, struggling with classes and things like that. So as someone who's faced the fire and who's been out there and who's dealt with all of these things, I've been with First Point for 7 years now, and I've been very, very, really, really enjoyed it, to be honest. It's a very rewarding job. It's great to see so many kids committing to going out to the US. And First Point as a company, we've got different departments, but there's other departments that help them kind of get placed and get scholarships and eventually go out there. So because I've been here 7 years now, I'm actually seeing kids who I worked with at the very beginning of my First Point career, 7 years ago, who are now graduating and going on to do other things. Some of them are actually coming back to work with us. So Andrew's got a pretty kind of strict policy that he much prefer former student athletes to work for First Point because they've got that experience and that know-how. And yeah, listen, I really enjoy it. It's taken me all across the world. I've been as far as Australia. I've been to the Middle East quite a bit recently. China, we've got offices out there, and
And is that for recruitment then, Callum, in the sense of going out to meet people that are looking to go over to the States?
yeah. So the universities that we work with, the challenge that coaches have is that they don't really have the time and the resources for the most part to be able to come over and recruit themselves. So we're
Right.
here to kind of do it for them. I don't get to work with golfers as much as I would like. I've predominantly been working with football players, rugby players, any sport
Okay.
really. Anyone who shows an interest or a desire to go out to the US, I'm their first, pardon the pun, I'm their first point of contact, and I get a chance to sit down with them as a family and explain what life was like for me, what life potentially will be like for them, what scholarships look like, what the process looks like, all the universities we work with, and really just give them a kind of bit of knowledge as to what this is all about.
Yeah. And that must be really rewarding. You've mentioned seeing some of these kids that you helped at the start coming through. Is there any that kind of stand out to you in terms of what they've achieved from a sporting point of view?
There's really, I mean, there's a lot of really good success stories, but success can be measured in completely different ways. So I think just the fact that an 18-year-old goes over to America and lives on their own for 4 years and graduates and takes their sport to another level, that's a success in itself. Um, I would say I'm a success story because I've come back to First Point and I'm now helping, but I wouldn't say we've got too many sort of famous athletes out there. But the reality is, Ross, it's so difficult to become a professional athlete these days. And I think it's important just to become a professional in something, whether that means being a lawyer or an accountant or whatever it is that you eventually do, but getting that 4 year experience of playing sport at the same time it can't be matched anywhere in the world. So that's the message that I try to go over to these kids, and I don't know, maybe I'll get it over to my own kids at one point. I don't know, but I would love for them to be able to experience something like this as well. So
Yeah, and what you're giving them access to is a lot of life experience, whether that is sport related, whether it's education related, dealing with, as you say, moving to another country, which is a huge step in anybody's life,
yeah,
never mind at 18. I think that's fantastic that you've got that platform there that
yeah,
that can help people get into what they're basically chasing after. And chasing after doesn't mean, oh, I'm going to be on the PGA Tour, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly. And everybody will have a slightly different experience, and it's all about just setting them up and preparing them for the next kind of 4 or 5 years of their life once they get finished high school. I tell them all, like, I'm not here to try and tell you should do this or convince you this is what you need to do. This is entirely your decision. But the ones who do it, the ones who go out there and commit to the 4 years and actually get through it. I think everyone would tell you the same. It's life changing.
Brilliant. And it must be really rewarding for you as well. So
Yeah.
I'm going to get back to you in golf, Callum. So what's your situation with golf these days? Are you still playing? Are you trying to
I'm
beat
not.
people on the golf course?
I don't have any time, to be perfectly honest. I've got two very active young children who are both crazy into their golf. They both love their football. And as I said at the start of the kind of show, like my dad spent so much of his time with me and getting me places and taking me here, there, and everywhere. I want to kind of replicate that with my two kids. So, I don't play golf nearly as much as I'd like to, but I get more joy out of watching them now. They're playing at a good level for their age, and there's a lot of kind of plans in place this summer. I've been asked if I want to play for club manager again. I've recently joined Ferranese, which is literally 5 minutes from my house. I've been asked if I want to play with them in the team games. So the answer is, if I'm available, yes, I will. If I'm available to play medals, yes, I will. But the boys' football and golf come first.
Oh, that's brilliant. Brilliant. So, Callum, a couple of questions to wrap up. And you've talked about First Point, but you've also talked about the amazing journey you've been on. So, any things as advice for people who are looking to get into sport, whether it is golf, it's not necessarily your primary thing now, but what advice would you be giving them from your perspective?
I think it's important to an aim, have a goal in life, like whether it is sport related or whether it's business related or whatever it is, and just kind of work towards it. And if you do achieve it, don't give up. Keep going. Try and get to the next level and the next level and the next level, because you're never ever going to perfect what you do. I was literally just watching a thing with Barry and Eddie Hearn earlier. They're multi-millionaires, and they're still trying to be better. And so there is no stopping. And I think for young kids in particular, it's trying to encourage them. As parents, we're all responsible to try and give them the best chance that we can, encourage them as much as we can. But for kids themselves, they have to want to do it. They have to want to get better. They have to want to improve. For golf, the kind of message I send to the golfers I speak to nowadays is, playing as difficult competitions as you possibly can, even if you finish last. Try and beat the best players. It's okay winning junior medals every week when you're playing against your pals, but you want to be playing against the very best. And it's the same in everything you do. One thing I'll kind of go back to what I said at the start of at the very beginning, where I got to play with these older players and more experienced players. That's where I learned how to play the game. You're not necessarily going to learn to get better playing with players that are the same or lesser standard than you. Play with the players that are better than you, and you'll learn from them. So, yeah, just keep working towards a goal and do everything you can to try and get there.
And I think that's brilliant advice, and I really love you opening up about that. So lastly, any social media handles? What's the sort of contact details for First Point if people want to get in touch?
Well, my handle's Callum Macaulay Golf on Instagram. I don't really use Twitter or Facebook. And our website's firstpointusa.com. So if there's anyone out there listening or wants to get in touch with me about any kind of golf scholarship related materials or any sports specific scholarship related materials, more than welcome to contact me through our website.
Brilliant. Well, listen, thanks a lot, Callum. It's been great hearing from you. Brilliant to hear those stories, and look forward to trying to get a game with you next time I'm back up in Scotland. All right. Thank you.
Definitely. My pleasure, Ross. Thanks for having me.
Cheers. I'm sure you enjoyed that episode, folks, and thanks for tuning in. In the next episode of Link by Golf, I'm delighted to have Peter Whiteford joining me. In the meantime, please like, share and subscribe to the podcast, and if you've got any feedback, send it to linkbygolf@yahoo.com. Thanks a lot. Goodbye.